You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General? Oh.
Weesa back with the Bombad Generals. Hey, we got a great episode here with Matt, the co-host, and also a very special guest, Johnny Keys. Karma55 also in the Discord. How are you, fellas?
I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me join.
And just to be clear, you know, even though we talked about trying to find a third co-host a while back, you know, don't let that get in your head here, Johnny. You know, don't feel the pressure of the audition or whatnot.
This isn't an interview? What's going on?
Yeah. No, I think we haven't had people on for a while, and we were getting restless. I think people are sick of hearing our voices too. So very happy we could have you on. Yes. Yeah, exactly. As I talk over Seth incessantly, and he just has to sit there, and he gets to edit though. So honestly, I don't know. He could do anything he wants in the edit. I don't re-listen to the podcast, so he could make me sound like more of a complete idiot than I am, and get his revenge. But this is actually providential in a way, because the first thing we were going to talk about is Payload. And Johnny and I played the other day in preparation for LVO. We did not play Payload, but I saw you had Payload in your deck, which is good that we're getting a Payload person here, because I don't think I've included it in my deck since it got changed. Way back at CRB, I guess, was when it changed, basically.
Yeah, a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah. I have not been scared of the Payload changes, and just kind of leaned into everybody else being scared about it. And for the most part, it's been pretty successful. I've had a couple people make mistakes turn 0 with it. So yeah, kind of excited to talk about it.
Yeah, let's dive right in. Payload. I don't know if we want to put it on screen or not. I can try, but just the summary, basically. Before deployment, each person is going to put a bomb cart down inside their deployment zone, and then the opponent of that person picks a piece of terrain that is not fully within a deployment zone, and you score points based on how close the cart gets to that piece of terrain at the end of the game. So key positions, the piece of terrain cannot be inside the deployment zone at all. Payload, as long as like a millimeter is sticking out of the deployment zone, it is legal. And starting with the blue player is how it starts. So there's a lot of control for the red player here, actually, too, with whether they want the cards to cross, where they kind of want the cards to cross, based on which piece of terrain they pick. So I guess, yeah, Johnny, what sort of mistakes, maybe that's a good place to start, were people making turn 0 with Payload?
Most of it with the new rules was just if there's a wall in the way or a building or something where you have to snake around it quite a bit more than what you would have done before, where you just hop right over something. So it's just not looking at the actual travel distance of the payload. People have been making mistakes with that. And then just in deployment, when you're picking sides, there can be some pretty big swings in where that objective is headed. So if there's a piece of terrain that is not, there's not one far away, that can make it a lot more difficult for whoever happened to choose that side of the board.
Yeah, it's one of those ones too where it's not only the table edge, but each deployment can have a lot of variability depending on where the deployment zone is, what terrain is a legal choice and what isn't. And I think other than the rules changes, so I guess for those unaware, the big change that happened in CRB, which people like me, cowards, are scared of, is you can't basically have infinite jump anymore. You're limited to basically the height of a barricade, the height of the handlebars on the cart, which is not very high. which is even losing one turn is rough for scoring. But that's the main thing. But the other thing that scares me is, well, red player gets to choose kind of where the carts cross, in a sense, because they have the last pick. They get to have last ban. So if they know we're playing Payload, they can ban into a deployment that was also kind of advantageous in terms of maybe they have a shorter route or whatnot, or it avoids stuff. And they got to pick table side in the first place, knowing Payload was in the deck, which just makes me, I don't know, that makes me nervous. But for the most part, it hasn't burned you. It sounds like it's burned opponents.
Yeah, it's burned opponents more than it's burned me. I've lost games playing it, but it's mostly where the games are even and something hasn't swung my way; it swung the other way, and it usually comes down to a close measurement here or there, or just one unit getting lost at the wrong time. Is a lot of time what happens with Payload. You end up in a scrum a lot of the times, or you end up toilet bowling a lot of the times, and you kind of have to figure out what type of game it's going to be right away. You might have 1 or 2 turns to sort of figure out, you move your payload for free, and then after that becomes a real decision of, am I going to continue pushing my payload, or do I just sit back and try to win on victory points and kill points?
Payload is one of those weird games where you can just what am I trying to say? Where the outcome can be pretty predetermined, and it can be impossible for one person to win if you don't push your card enough. But at the same time, yeah, as you say, you don't have to push your card if you know you can stop your opponent's card and just play. And then it becomes like VAPs, like Hostage, in a sense, where you're playing for kill points. Which, listen to our last episode.
Yeah, yeah. I
I think some of the risks, like in that, go for it, Johnny.
Oh, I was just going to say it was a lot like Sabotage too. That was a point I was going to make. So I agree with Matt on that point.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because you have to be really aggressive if you go to kill points, and normally, like, unlike VAPs where it's like your army's kind of split between 2 VAPs or your opponent's army, it's like that, like Payload, it's like their army's kind of all around the payload most of the time. So I think it's a little bit harder to take risks on Payload than it is on VAPs in most scenarios for me.
Mm-hmm. But also they're going to make themselves a bit more vulnerable potentially if your opponent is trying to push it. Then it, by nature of how the objective works, they're probably going to get a bit closer to you than they would in VAPs, just tapping their own VAPs. Now, what makes you take Payload, Johnny? What about your list, the kind of units you have that make you say, oh yeah, Payload's a good choice?
Yeah, I think usually if there's vehicles in my list, I tend to like to take it just because it's one that vehicles can actually influence the payload moving. I like to take it in lists where I'm okay with moving my army or having somebody. It's more, I guess, it's a good defense against armies that just like to sit there, generate tokens, and shoot at you. If somebody else has to move a lot, they're sort of wasting their actions that they tend to like to use, like something like KP or Intercept, where I'm just going to stand here until I need to score. This one, it actually makes them make a decision on whether they need to actually push their payload and either split up their army or just kind of waste some actions moving down the board.
How often would you say you're using those vehicles to attack the opposing payload? Because I think that's one of the good things about bikes. I think Blizzard was using a lot of payload. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it wasn't, but those kind of bike lists before the change, at least. I don't know, Seth, were you rocking Payload before the CRB change?
No, I wasn't rocking Payload, but I'm okay with playing Payload if I have bikes because of that instance. I remember a game where when the payloads clashed, I was keeping my bikes reserved like for 3 turns, and then as soon as they clashed, my bikes went in, and then I won on attrition, and I stopped the payload while continuing my payload because my bikes got into the fight, and that's 3 activations right there on both sides because their bases are big enough to where if I overlap the payload, I can rock both
oh yeah, Barks especially
as well.
Yeah. Even not in that situation, they're just so fast. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was and they have good defense, so they're harder to kill.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, even one turn where you can just hey, triple move my bikes and stop. If you have 3 of them, then your opponent needs to put 4 bodies on, which they might not be set up for. You stall them for 1 turn, and that can be the difference in getting into scoring range or not, getting 2 points or 1, which is big. And other vehicles too. I think maybe something unexplored or potentially useful would be body blocking with a large base. And I don't know if we lost Johnny or not, but no, I want to ask him about that because he does use ATRTs. Okay, you still got your audio. Good. Have you made much use, because you're rocking it with ATRTs rather than bikes, which can be pretty fast with that base and the speed 2 move. Do you ever find that you can kind of wall things off with those ATRTs and make it, if you get to their cart quickly, then they have to go around you to get into contesting range or something like that?
Yeah, so I looked this up the other day when it was sort of prepping, and it looks like bomb carts can move through any unit. So they can move through the ATRTs is my understanding, but that doesn't mean you can't sort of set it up to a point where the payload can't move the full way. They might just only be able to move, half a distance or less. So it's definitely something I've utilized in that capacity, or with any other big based vehicle. If you just put it in the way of them moving, losing, I don't know what 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, trying to go around your piece is because you can't land on top of the base at the end of your movement, is a pretty big determining factor, and can win and lose you a game just by only being able to get to range 2 versus range 1.
It is a long-standing pillar of this podcast that an extra 2 inches goes a long way. So
Amen.
We've always said that. We say that if we're talking about Legion, it's a game of inches. So yeah, I was thinking more about troopers, blocking troopers and stuff moving around, but that's a really good point you make with the carts. As far as, yeah, it can go through, but it can't land on them because they can't be displaced. So that is very spicy, and makes a lot of sense to me.
You mentioned displacement, and I hadn't really thought about that. That's one thing you kind of have to pay attention to when you're moving your troops, and paying attention to leave a spot for where you want the bomb cart to end up. I find that mostly in turn 1 and turn 2 is when that ends up being the biggest issue, but it's something to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. And if you get really tricky, then you can use the bomb carts because it's portable cover. So I know I've set it up where it's hey, maybe I move this unit out to take a shot and they're a bit vulnerable, but hey, after the bomb cart does its move, now it's in front of them and they're going to get heavy cover next turn, so I'm not too worried. Maybe less important these days with kind of the ease of getting cover, but hey, there's still open boards out there, and I think that's a good thing to take advantage of.
Still a tool in your tool belt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also just I've seen a lot open firing lanes, lanes. So having that bomb cart as a cover piece for that firing lane is very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of boards that maybe have a lot of LOS sort of terrain or big pieces and not a lot of scatter. So a mobile scatter, not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Other than vehicles, what kind of units are we looking at for taking payload? The thing that comes to mind for me is aggro kind of units that want to be in a scrum, because if the bomb carts are going to cross and you're not toilet bowling, there's going to be a scrum, and people who like that are going to excel. If your Wookiees are walking up with your bomb cart and then they can just hey, look, we're in range 2 of each other now because we have to be. Kaboom. Or someone like a Yoda, who can just pull this, or not pull the strings, but like guidance, disengage, move all around. Luke, I loved Luke on Bomb Cart for that reason. He's a big kind of getting the scrum guy. The rest of the list maybe not so much, but
now, let's say you bring a Wookiee army.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I'd be worried about that is like the low activation count. That I would dare to say that, like, if you're having a low activation list, I would probably want to bring Payload. But if it's like a mid activation list, like a 9 or like a 10, then like I'd be a little bit more comfortable bringing Payload.
But to get to 9 or 10, they've got some weaker stuff, right? That's probably not going to be on the Payload itself, I would think. Right? Like if it's a 10-act Empire list with maybe 2 snipers, and you've got an 8-act, Kashyyyk Defenders list, you both kind of have 8 activations that are going to get onto bomb carts. And even if you don't, you're going to be able to do things effectively. You're going to be able to really chip into their activation count once you close.
Oh, I'm thinking like a 10-act like Fleet Trooper list.
Oh, who runs that these days? That's madness. No one, I shouldn't even say these days. No one's ever run that. That's crazy. Yeah. That's Fleet fair. Troopers are just called the bad version of BSEs. Black Side Enforcers are just vetted fleets in every way. But I think Black Suns like it, but they're not sitting in 10-act lists usually. But you never know. Yeah,
it's like 8 maybe 9-act lists for them, but
if it's spanned,
they have a lot of bodies. Like so that helps them a lot.
They have a lot of bodies, and
they can take a hit, which is important.
Yeah, well, and they can delete a unit pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And if you have to cross,
if you're low in activation,
you have to. Yeah, you can't really range control against they only have range 2. You can't really range control against it because if you stay back too far, then your payload's just not moving. So then it becomes a battle of attrition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is not a range control like objective at all. Like gun lines and range, like that's out the door right there.
Yeah, exactly. Those ones. They can still play it, but they're probably not going to want to have it in their deck. Deployments, I think you can be fairly versatile. Those kind of lists, you're probably going to have the long edge deployments like, your battle lines, your danger close, hemmed in, something like that. But if you had a short edge deployment, it might not be the worst thing, because if you picture something like Long March, it constricts the field and it just makes it even more certain that there's going to be a scrum somewhere. But you're probably not running both in the same deck, more because of lists than anything. And if you're playing Disarray, if we want to highlight one specific one, these Payload decks might often have Disarray if you're, like a speeder heavy list or something. It's quite possible that you should just not worry about ever moving the cart. Like there are times legitimately when in that situation, because they can put the objective so far away, you just look at it and say, no one can score this game unless you like use or maybe it's just like no one can score if their cart stops at least once. So I just have to win on kill points and stop their cart once. And also try not to play it as hemmed in red if you can help it.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
please.
If I've got hemmed in my deck,
sometimes you have to.
I was going to say, if I've got hemmed in my deck, a lot of times,
if you're running your deck,
if I've got hemmed in my deck, a lot of times Payload is a high priority that I'll throw it in there. Because it allows you as the person controlling it to force the person off of one of those two. it gives you a little bit more control over what's happening, and gives you a little more foresight into, they definitely don't want to play these two, so you can manipulate around your vetoing strategy a little bit more.
Yeah, it can really create some tough choices.
Yeah, like how we talked about, like with conditions and how utilizing conditions as like benefits to you. It's like a free band or like it's a used band that your opponent will use. So it's more, you can get a more like a battle condition that you want.
Yeah, and I mean, often, again, these kind of lists, you might have bombing run breakthrough. So if you come up against a gun line, in other situations, they might say, oh, I just don't want to play bombing run breakthrough. But now you're adding another objective in where, depending if you can get on the deployment, it's like, well, if I ban here or ban here, oh no. And it just can fry your brain sometimes.
Oh, man.
If it comes up just right.
I'm being convinced to add this to my deck.
I'm still I'm a coward. Like, it's something like Worlds. If you just get screwed once by it, that's once too many.
That's true.
But LVO, you can take a loss, so I get it. I don't know. I just wish they would revert it. It was such a good objective before. And now it's just a little, I don't know. I still think it's a little too random.
It's dangerous. It's really risky. Which I think running a risky objective is tough. Like, you can run a risky list or a risky unit, but like when it's an objective, a win condition, that's where.
Maybe if I had bounty or something, or like secret mission to kind of offset that. Maybe. You're a better man than us, Johnny. You're a better man than us. Yeah. That's the long and short of it. Shall we move on now to something much more bland? Rollout.
This is my notes for ready. This is my notes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's long march, but better for vehicles. Okay, that's it. Next.
I think the main thing is it has some extra text about vehicles. That's nice, but you're not bringing it because of that. Almost certainly.
It's true. Yeah.
I run rollout in a bajillion lists without vehicles, and it's not always the right move in a list with vehicles, especially depending what your vehicles are. If it's speeder bikes, they care about way more things than getting deployed forwards a little bit. If it's an AAT, okay, yeah, that's pretty nice. You can start. It's kind of like better long march in a sense that you can kind of start closer to people, but also have your objectives a little further if you're trying to play like defensively.
It's kind of like a major offensive.
Yeah, it's just kind of it's whatever. It's another short edge to short edge deployment where you start relatively far apart.
Mm-hmm. So Johnny, do you have rollout in your list?
With triple ATRT, it's not bad. If you can get a shield of ATRTs in front of you with the LOS blocking cylinders now, that's a nice, decent use of the extra deployment. We did some trigonometry. What was it, last episode, to figure out the starting distance apart on major offensive. I guess we could do that here, but it's, I don't know, about range 4-ish from corner to corner. We'll leave that for the viewers at home to do the math.
Yeah.
Oh, and we've lost Johnny for people who are audio only. That's why we're stalling here. So we'll see if he rejoins. We can talk bad about him, or we can move on to rapid reinforcements.
Yeah. There's not much to say for rollout. So
yeah,
don't bring it if you're speeders. Pretty much good for gun lines and long range.
If you're going to bring long march, you're probably bringing rollout. If you wouldn't bring long march, you're probably not bringing rollout. They're kind of very similar. Okay, Johnny will be back in just a moment. So perhaps we'll go to commercial, and we can be right back when he comes. Buy stuff.
Bombad Generals are back from commercial break. Johnny, welcome back. Sorry about those technical difficulties. But we're going to finish our discussion, continue on to the last battle deck we're talking about, which is Rapid Reinforcements, the condition.
Mm-hmm.
I hate this condition.
Okay, the big question for me. So around this time last year, no one would take it unless you had Dark Troopers, in which case 100% you take it, because
I think it's still the case.
That was my question. Yeah. Is that still the case? Or with the decline of Dark Troopers, do you ever put this in your deck? Even if you got like FDs or like some really aggro stuff, you're not putting Rapid?
So for me as a clone player, no, because there's no need for me to take it. Maybe I would take it for Wookiees, but even then, I don't want to run the risk of like Dark Troopers. Like it's pretty risky to take it, in my opinion.
I don't like surprises. I don't like things hitting me in the rear when I'm not ready for it. Again, talking about Legion. So like that's, even if you're like a Wookiee list, putting 2 Wookiees, if you have 6 of them, putting 2 of them in Rapid doesn't really like help the survivability of the army, because they'll still have stuff to shoot at probably.
True.
And now you just have maybe more angles to worry about. I don't know. I think it's just my natural what's the term for it? It's like risk avoidance, where I'm always worried about what other people will do to me on Rapid, less than I'm excited by all the weird things I can do to other people on Rapid.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think well, at least I don't play lists where I have units that I would even really consider rapid reinforcing. Again, that's Wookiees, Magna Guards are kind of scary when they get to range 2 of you right away. Yeah, but I haven't played enough FD lists lately where it would be something that, because there's always a consideration and you can put it out there, but playing Rebels like I am right now, the lack of order control is pretty scary. Because if like you pull your FD turret first and you've got that one, set aside, or both of them set aside if you're running 2, that means it has to go down right then. And you don't have any control over that.
I think that's fine with FDs specifically, though, because they're going to deploy. Mostly it's just to give you a little bit more deployment, like kind of scout plus infiltrate. But for anything close, even Dark Troopers, you don't want to. Yeah, you want the enough order control that you pull them late rather than early. Like, yeah, you don't want to. You don't want to pull fleets and then put them out aggressively, at least. If you're not doing aggressive stuff, you can kind of get them up the board, but then like the reward isn't that great. I don't know. Again, it's just more angles that I have to worry about. I don't like. And if you're playing FDs, especially, unless it's like 4 FD, what's the battle force called? Hoth Defenders, Echo Base. That's it. If you have 4, then maybe, just because it's really hard to fit 4 in your deployment zone. But if you've just got like 2, you're probably running a list where you kind of want a bit of range control, in which case you really don't want Rapid, because Rapid just bypasses range control. So yeah, the use case for this these days, I don't know. I think it's basically Dark Troopers and something else if you're feeling spicy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't played not what's the one, Ewoks. I'm trying to think of the battle force. I haven't Bright Tree. I haven't played that, but with 13 acts, I mean, that could be something that might be worth looking into. But again, I'm a little too scared of the Dark Trooper, just because if you come up with a list against them, then it's like I was talking about on Payload. It forces you into not letting them get that. Yeah. Otherwise, you just lose. You just
basically
lose. Yeah.
Especially if you're Rebels with white saves. Because for those unaware, one of the reasons Dark Troopers love it so much is not only because they can get hella close to you, but because they have 2 activation tokens. So instead of not activating the first turn, they still get 1 activation. So they can still rapid in just outside range 2 and then walk up, boom shaboom, with a whole blast and whatever it is, 10 dice, and ruin your day really badly. You don't want that. Mm-hmm. The last time I think I played with Rapid on Darks where someone actually let me have it, I think the game was over midway through turn 2 concession. I don't think we even got to the end. It's a bad time to be on the receiving end.
Yep.
You can't put the cool stuff in. You can't put in operatives. You can't put in commanders. So you can't, I don't know, do any crazy stuff like... Yeah, you can't do that. You can't use it to get secret mission. If for whatever reason, if you do end up playing it, it's just, again, you got to be very careful to not kind of isolate a unit. That's definitely a time you don't want to be like, hey, this VAP, I'm going to put it way over here and put 1 unit guarding it. Because then whatever they rapid, boom, right there on the objective, messing you up. There is actually a small use case, like if you're playing clones, I don't think it's enough to take it in your deck. But if you're playing like a clone list, you can set up some funky fire supports. It's not great, but it's a thing you can do. But yeah, it's not going to make me say, hey, I want rapid reinforcements.
Yeah. One thing, if you do end up playing it and it's not against Dark Troopers for some reason, the opposite of what you said, don't isolate a unit. If you can like force them into isolating a unit in a corner, you have to be a little bit careful with it. But if you can get them to set one of their units there, all of a sudden that unit's isolated and you can just go, take that one out in a turn or something like that. So it's a little bit of a strategy to force somebody maybe into doing that. Something to think about.
Yeah. I guess the other thing too, if you want to zone people out, is because they have to deploy beyond range 2 of the enemies, that includes everyone in the unit. So you can use cohesion to your advantage if you really need to. Like, let's say you've got a naked squad on the side of your army, you can kind of push them out a little bit further and cohere wide to really push them back. Hopefully they drop and you're getting activation to run away. And now instead of being very close to your army, they're maybe just a little bit further than they would have otherwise been. It doesn't necessarily make a huge difference, but sometimes it's the difference between, hey, they get to rapid right behind a building, or okay, they have to be a bit further away, and I can get an angle and shoot them. So you can use cohesion to your advantage on that. But yeah, if you want to keep it simple, just don't play it unless you have Dark Troopers, and then you won't ever have to play it.
That's definitely the recommendation right now.
Yeah. People are still using Dark Troopers. They're not as common, but, Finn was just going far with them in Denmark. I think I've seen people online talking about trying out some different Dark Trooper lists. I think they're getting some new life with Inquisitors. People are trying Inquisitors with them.
Finn is officially the top player Elo-wise now, so if you don't know who Finn is.
Yeah. He's some German guy, I think. He's all right. Yeah. Last time I played a tournament with Finn, he dropped before top 8 because he was too scared to play me, is what I tell myself. Yeah, he 3-0'd day 1 and then said, never mind, I'm good. And then the person who replaced him, I did end up playing in round 1, so... I know your tricks, Finn, trying to hang on to that ELO rating and not suffer a bad defeat. And we've had him on this podcast, I believe. It was the Empire tier list back in September, I want to say, late August.
Maybe. I can't remember.
So good Empire player. Good player, just generally.
Great player, period.
Yeah. As we say, sidetrack. That's just to say, Darks still exist, and you may come across them. And it's a lot easier for them to get rapid when they are red player using your deck.
This is true.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. That's all I have to say about rapid and all these things. Johnny, do you have anything you want to say about these or Life Legion in general? Any words of wisdom? You're the old man on the team. We look to you for all things life wisdom.
I don't have anything. I don't know when this is going to come out. So if I see you at LVO, I'll be happy to say hi. And always love meeting people there and hopefully having some good games from my standpoint. But yeah, it'll be fun. I look forward to seeing everybody at LVO. And thanks for having me on the podcast, guys.
Real quick before we end it, this is coming out after LVO.
But it's coming out after.
What's your predictions for LVO?
Oh, I don't know. We just looked at it looks like it's a fairly big balance of what was it, split between GAR and Empire for the largest two factions. Rebels coming in second. This is tough. I haven't been paying attention to the big Legion games too much, other than listening to some podcasts here and there. That's a lot of separatists would be my first inclination. I'm a little, interested to see what comes out of that. I think they're kind of in a tougher spot right now. And then I don't know. That's a lot of Empire, I think, for what's been being seen lately. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. If there's a lot of vehicles, armor in that, I'm going to be pretty happy because I took 3 ATSTs, and I think that should be a good
ATRTs, right?
ATRTs, yeah. 3 ATSTs in a Rebel list would have been impressive too. So or just the bounty hunters. Facing, I played a practice game against Matt here the other day, and he had Bosk, and Bosk it turns out is pretty good still.
Does work.
Yeah, lots of crits coming out of there. I don't know. I don't really know what to expect. 7 mercenaries, I think, is quite a bit more than what we've seen at some tournaments, so that'll be interesting to see what those lists look like. I just don't really know what to expect. I was kind of going into this wavering quite a bit on my list choices, and finally just decided I wanted to take Ahsoka, and then started building out around that. I think
obviously Yoda Arcs has been a big player in some recent tournaments and getting a lot of hype, and just kind of tanky Republic in general. I'm really excited to see. I feel like this is a tournament where people are going to get experimental and really try some stuff kind of before Worlds, because I think for a lot of North American players, this is their time to really try something new and stress test it in a competitive environment before Worlds. And I definitely agree with you, Johnny. Like, I don't know what the Empire players are going to bring. I have some guesses. I mean, I tried a Bosk list in Empire the other day, but I think that's where we're going to see some very creative things, because they have a lot of good pieces. It's just finding the right mix that's a little tricky. Republic, I think it's going to be kind of the same stuff. Tanky Yoda lists, tanky Anakin lists, a few Kashyyyk, Wookiee spams. You know the deal.
Yep, I think that's going to be the majority of those.
Now, what do we want? What do you guys want to win LVO, other than Johnny?
I'm gonna be honest. I want Yoda to do really bad, so everyone comes to realization that, like, oh, maybe he's not as good.
We shouldn't run Yoda. That's fair.
Don't run Yoda for Worlds.
I'll put all my mental capacity into just the Yoda games.
I would say maybe the opposite. If Yoda can do really well, then that'll get even more people on the bandwagon and make a counter meta play even more of an option at Worlds.
It's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I just say this is not a Yoda player, so I'm like, everyone.
Yeah, you're a different Yoda player. You're fine.
I'm a fun Yoda player, so.
Okay.
What do you mean, okay?
No, that's true. That is true.
Yeah. Yep.
Alrighty.
Really.
Yeah. Thanks for jumping on, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
For having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, at the end of the day, this podcast is so we can talk to our friends. So, always happy to do that.
It's true.
Good luck at LVO.
Good luck.
Always be rolling dice and always be staying Gungan.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.